Hello everyone, and welcome. Well, because of the surprising Fullbringer returns during my journey through the Thousand Year Blood War, they've been back on my mind lately, and I realized I never ranked them. So let's rank them. Remember, like all my other lists, this is based on my own personal preferences and not on power or anything like that. It's just who I like least to who I like most. If you disagree, that's totally cool, and you're welcome to share your opinions below. As always, these rankings can change on a dime, whether it's after I learn new information, or they do something to change my mind, or a random new thought about them comes to me out of the blue. My favorites can always shift around over time. It just happens. This is only based on how I feel at this moment at the time of this particular recording, as a man that has not finished the Thousand Year Blood War quite yet, so who knows, maybe the three dead ones will finally show up and Giriko will finally get to fight and become the best Fullbringer. Another brief disclaimer, despite having a Fullbring, Ichigo will not be included on this list. Not only is his Fullbring kind of folded in beneath his more prominent traits, but it just wouldn't be fair. He's a phenomenal main character who has had so much more time and development in all kinds of ways, and a lot of those don't have much to do with his Fullbring. If you really need to know, and you demand that he be placed, Ichigo would be number one, but that's fairly obvious because he's such a great protagonist. But yeah, he's not going to be on the list, it would make it a little less fun. For somewhat similar reasons, I went back and forth on whether or not I should even include Chad and Orihime in this ranking, since they're also characters that have been around since early on, while the rest of these people were introduced in the Lost Agent arc more recently. But unlike Ichigo, Chad and Orihime mainly rely on their Fullbringer abilities throughout the series, even when they initially didn't know where that came from. So yeah, they're in here, even though Ichigo isn't, because they need some attention, which the Thousand Year Blood War hasn't given them much of so far, so yeah, I'm putting them here. Chad and Orihime will be included. So yeah, with the specifics and the rules kind of clear, let's get to the actual ranking. At number 9, I have Mo. I don't hate any of these characters. Just because he's last doesn't mean I dislike Mo. In this case, I just find him the least interesting of the group. I like that he's kind of this outlier that's barely part of Execution, that was recruited more as Tsukishima's lackey and errand boy. He's a bit naive, and there's a vulnerability about him that I also like a lot, and I got the sense that he was being pushed into doing a lot of these things due to Tsukishima's manipulation more than anything else. Still, Mo is the easiest Fullbringer to forget, maybe because he wasn't really part of Execution or because he wasn't really shown all that often. I'm not sure. Kind of fun powers. Someone had to be last on the list, and in this case, it unfortunately had to be Mo. At number 8, I have Giriko. I wanted a lot more out of Giriko. I wanted more time, I wanted more abilities, I wanted more. I was really vibing with the King Bradley as a butler look, and his timer powers seemed to have a lot of potential, but sadly, as I talked about at the time, Giriko really ended up just being a glorious sacrifice to the Kenpachi hype machine. As such, he didn't get a fight to really show what he could do, even after hulking out. But his backstory was kind of fun in a horrific Edgar Allan Poe kind of way, but it also showed him to be such a despicable person too. The fact he tested his powers out on his wife and then killed her, and even though he felt guilty about it later, like, wow. He had the makings of a great villain, but didn't really blossom into what he maybe could have been if he had been given more time. His perspective on his Fullbring and the God of Time is a really interesting thing as well, that I think stems from him needing to disassociate from what he did to his wife. And that alone could have been really fascinating to unpack more, but we didn't really do that. Still, he's around somewhere, from what we saw earlier in the current arc, so maybe he'll do something a little redeeming in the war. I know I joked about it at the start of the video, but I'm actually hoping to see a little more of his power in action. Giriko has just never had the time to really develop and never had the time to really endear himself to me. If he had been given more time, I could have really loved this psycho as a character. At number 7, I have Jackie, and Jackie is one of the more sympathetic members of Execution and has a really, really tragic past, but unfortunately outside of that is a little boring, I'm sad to say. I just didn't really connect much to her character, and she's not super memorable either. The Dirty Boots Fullbring power was a little fun, and I loved how utterly disturbing its origin was, but the power itself isn't a favorite of mine by any means. Unfortunately, Jackie's probably the most forgettable of the core Execution team too. She's chill, but maybe a little too chill. Like, she didn't leave too much of an impression, you know? It says a lot that I'm not really sad that she hasn't come back with the others during the 1,000-Year Blood War. It just hasn't felt like a big loss to not have her here, which I think is pretty telling. I feel bad, she's nice, and I hope she's out there living a much better life now, but yeah, not a favorite. At number 6, I have Yukio, and Yukio is an interesting one for me. He's one of the more twisted characters of Bleach, really, considering his backstory, but that's mostly buried beneath his, like, nonchalant, distracted persona that makes me laugh a bit. He's got incredibly fun powers connected to his love of video games, and the visual style that comes with the digital Fullbring adds a lot of flair when it appears. It's just very unique among all the powers of Bleach, even just on an aesthetic level. I also like his place as the financial backer for Execution, because at first you wouldn't expect someone this young to have that role, but yeah, it all ties back to that backstory, which is yikes. And he really becomes such a punk once he's revealed to be a bad guy. He was so easy to hate once he made that shift, but I appreciate him coming to help recently. I think he's overall pretty fun, even if he's not super likable. Yeah, Yukio kind of right here towards the middle of the pack. At number 5, and I'm sad to say that I have Chad. Chad is a really tough one because on the whole, I like Chad quite a bit. Always have. The problem is that the story hasn't seemed to really like Chad for a while. He hasn't been given much, and one of my only disappointments with the Lost Agent arc specifically was it seemed to be teeing Chad up for a chance to shine, and it never really happened. It never really paid off. And at least where I'm at, Chad hasn't been given much to do during the 1,000-Year Blood War either. I would have loved to have him get some more focus, but he's really been relegated to more of a background supporting character that hasn't reached his potential. It just feels kind of like Chad got left behind somewhere along the way during the story. I'm not sure exactly where, maybe during the Ronkar arc. Like, yeah, he's still around, but it's sometimes easy to forget that he's there, and I hate that. I really, really wish I could put him higher, but I just can't, at least not today. So yeah, middle of the pack, sadly, Chad. This could have easily been avoided if he had been given more chances to show more, but he just hasn't been given those chances, and I'm sad to say. Chad, number 5. At number 4, I have Gingo. I really enjoyed Gingo, both as the cool, helpful older brother character that he initially appeared to be, as well as his true nature as the secret antagonist of the Lost Agent arc. He was cool in both roles, and really did make me like him after I was initially pretty suspicious of him, so that's an accomplishment that I thought I pegged him as a bad guy, and then he changed my mind, and then it turned out I was wrong, so congrats to Kubo for making Gingo so likable that, you know, you forget about how shady he kind of was. He's got a great dynamic with Ichigo. He's got great moments in the Lost Agent arc. He's got fantastic designs for his transformations. I particularly really like the first one after he absorbs Ichigo's Fullbring with the black and white skeleton look. I think that's amazing. There's a lot to really like about Gingo. And as a concept, as a former substitute Soul Reaper that has, you know, gone rogue and is now doing his own thing, it's a great concept. The problem with Gingo is, and has been, I still feel like not seeing more of his past as the substitute Soul Reaper during the Lost Agent arc was a mistake, and would have really helped showcase the dichotomy between his time as the substitute versus Ichigo's. It would have just brought a little extra punch to that battle, and it's really a shame that it wasn't there. Like, it's a great fight, but it could have been amplified even more if we got to really understand what happened to him and where he was coming from, and where his disdain for for the Soul Society really comes from. Like, I get he felt like he was being restricted and he was being monitored and he was being manipulated, but there's clearly more of a story there that we didn't get to see. Like, it's a shame the only thing we saw of Ginjo's past really was one panel of him as a Soul Reaper finding Tsukishima. That was it. I've been told that story gets told in a novel that I'll get around to reading at some point after I finish the manga, so maybe his rank here will change after that, but I still would have preferred it to actually be within the Bleach narrative, within the Lost Agent arc. I would have preferred, even if the backstory is fantastic and totally worth it, I still think it would have worked best, before or during that fight with Ichigo. So at this specific moment, I find Ginjo to be great, but sadly not quite fleshed out as much as I'd like him to be. But for what we got, he was an exciting, interesting villain that I really liked. Number 3 being Orihime might seem insane to some people, but I've loved her character since early in the series. Her storyline with Sora was one of the things that really got me emotionally invested in Bleach, and I loved her eventually finding her own power and how she utilizes it in a way that's so in tune with who she is as a person, about protection, non-violence, healing. And I was loving the Arrancar arc's insane revelations about the potential of her power, only for that to kind of be a red herring and not get followed up on, which was a shame. Like, I wish she'd been instrumental somehow to defeating Aizen back then in some way, but that wasn't how things shook out. While Orihime has been underutilized in recent arcs, and I've always felt the anime kind of doesn't do her character justice a lot of the time, I've always been pretty empathetic toward her character, and I've really enjoyed her throughout the series, so that's why she lands right here at number 3. I know there are some Orihime haters out there, but I really like her character, and I wish we got to see more of it. Yeah, like Chad, she's kind of been reduced to the background, but I do like her more than Chad overall. At number 2, I have Riruka. I don't know if people will be surprised that I have Riruka at number 2, but I think she deserved the runner-up spot. What a great character. She's not super crucial to Bleach as a whole, but I loved the little role she had throughout the Lost Agent arc. And it was fun having her back recently in the Thousand Year Blood War, even for such a brief moment. There was just more depth and subtlety to her that some of the others lacked, mixed in with a great design that really captured the seemingly immature fun of this character that was hiding something much more complex beneath the surface. Her powers were so interesting because they were, they can be so fun. Like, you can shrink someone down into a dollhouse to fight a plushie, but at the same time that's absolutely horrific that she trapped someone in a plushie, there's a lot of layers to her powers that are both fun and a little silly, but also absolutely terrifying, which I love. Like, that's the sweet spot. And hearing her perspective on why she feels the Fullbringers need to stick together against the rest of the world, combined with learning a bit about some of the challenges she faced being born with her powers, it all painted a clear picture of a young woman that hasn't had an easy life and has had trouble trusting people and maybe a bit stunted, but that aspect of her was very endearing. Her crush on Ichigo is wholesome and cute, but really it's all of the little moments with her that built to her big moment of heroism in the Lost Agent arc. She's great, and her coming back in the Thousand Year Blood War was particularly exciting and turned out wonderfully for as brief of a time as it was. She might still get more, but if that's it, I'm just glad we got one last chance to spend some time with her and, have a fun couple little moments. Yeah, Riruka at number 2. She's great. I don't usually talk about family matters or about some of my oldest friends, and it feels a bit superfluous to put the very first character we ever met in Bleach in the number 1 spot. But here we are. In all seriousness, what can I say about my cousin Shu that I haven't already ranted and raved about during my first time reading videos? What a fantastic, utterly terrifying villain. He brought some of the best psychological horror to the series with his really trippy and disorienting manipulation that his Fullbring allows him to have. It was all terrifying and horrifying, and I absolutely loved it. He's not the most in-depth character. He's not the most multi-dimensional character. We don't really know much about a lot lot of his motivations and a lot of his personality even. He's kind of intentionally this blank slate that can be anything to anyone if he chooses to be. He can suddenly be Orihime's brother in the past. He can suddenly be Ichigo's cousin. He can suddenly be someone that Byakuya used to train with. He can be all things to all people if he wants to be. And I think that's why him not having much of a backstory as opposed to Ginjo actually works, because he doesn't really need one. It's actually scarier that we don't know much about him. Whereas Ginjo was kind of fueled by his past, Tsukishima's past, the only part of it that really matters, it seems, is his loyalty to Ginjo and where that comes from. Everything else feels like it should be unknown, and I really liked that in the end. But I think part of why I love Tsukishima as a villain is just how badly he breaks Ichigo down. He wrecks him mentally and emotionally in a way that didn't require some shocking revelation that turned Ichigo's world upside down. No, he was solely gaslighting Ichigo and using his abilities to make him feel crazy and to have his loved ones think he was crazy, and to just completely warp Ichigo's whole reality and make him question his whole existence. And it was so good. When I think of the Lost Agent arc, I don't think of either of the eponymous lost agents, Ichigo and Ginjo. The first thing I think of is Tsukishima sitting on the couch in Ichigo's living room, having been welcomed inside as family. When I think of the Fullbringers, none of the others come to mind first. He may not have been the main antagonist like it initially seemed. Hell, he ends up kind of being an underling just playing along with Ginjo's plans, but it's Tsukishima that stole the show. He was amazing, he's family, he's a great friend, he's everything to everyone, and he's fantastic. And that's why Tsukishima is the best Fullbringer. And that'll do it for my personal ranking of the Fullbringers. Let me know some of your favorites in the comments below. I'm excited and hopeful that a few of them will still have more to show, but we're running out of story, so we'll see. As always, if you liked what you saw here, please comment, like, subscribe. If you want to support the channel, please join the Patreon. We have hours and hours of manga read-alongs and anime reactions over there. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. Hope you all have a great day. Go easy on me. It's all personal preference. Take care. Bye.